Welcome back, lions, lionesses. We are here. It's 2022, and just like that, time really flies. Perhaps a reminder that time does go fast, but also a little bit of a alert, perhaps, that we should be present and enjoy the moment. And the best time to start is always now. So it is currently the 4th of January. I'm here with another fantastic guest, friend, fellow coach, Amber Hudson. Thank you for joining me this morning. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So we're going to be unpacking that. We're going to be getting into some interesting topics. So as ever, let's dive straight in. And first of all, as ever, tell the people who you are, what you do, but more importantly, why you do it.
Okay, so thanks for having me. It's very exciting to be here. I've been listening to your podcasts for quite a long time now, and they're awesome. So what do? Probably best to explain it if I give you an example of how clients come to me. Typically, I get women that will come to me who are usually, in their 30s or older. Mm-hmm. They come to me because they usually are a bit lost. They've lost their groove. They've been busy with careers, kids, study, running a house, looking after parents, all those sorts of things. And they haven't had time for themselves, and they've just lost their way with their fitness and their health, and they want to get it back. So what I do is I use a combined approach of nutrition and training to get them back on board. Quite often, primarily, I'm a weight loss coach. Usually that's statistically, 70% Australians overweight, obese. That's, most of the problem, and that's usually most of the reason why women will come to see, a professional like me anyway. So we usually pick apart their life to start with, look at why they don't have any time for themselves, where their time's going, what they're eating, and a lot of the time they're not doing too badly most of the time, but it's the 30-40% of the weekends and the stress eating and the occasional binge because they're restrictive eating, all those kinds of things. There's usually a really obvious glaring problem why their food and nutrition is out of whack. Mm-hmm. So depending on the client, that can be an approach of either just wipe the slate clean, start with a meal plan, follow that, we'll tweak it as we go along to optimise it for you. Or we will either, if most of it's kind of okay, we'll just sort of build in some things like, well, you're going too long without food here, you're not sort of doing anything to satisfy a sweet tooth here, you've got a few unplanned social events here, maybe we can have a bit more structure around those. So I'll do that with them first, and then we set up a training program which will typically be at least 2 sessions a week with me, and then building in things that are manageable for them. So a lot of the time I get women who are, the HIIT class fans. They'll be doing 5 or 6 classes a week, sometimes 2 classes a day. Like, why aren't I getting anywhere with my fat loss? And it's not right. So, okay, well, it's just, do you enjoy all of that? If not, let's wind it back. Why don't you go for a walk with your kids? Why don't you do some yoga on a YouTube at home? Why don't you, cut your classes back to 2 a week of the ones that you really, really love? Or, all these sorts of things. And we just find what works for them and fit them with a program that suits their lifestyle. So all of my clients have a minimum, if it's personal training clients, it's a 6-week term. If it's nutrition coaching only, it's a 12-week term. And I need that time to be able to go from week to week to find out, how was your week last week? What worked? What didn't work? Mm-hmm. What could we have done better there? Let's mitigate that for next week. Do you have Thursday night wine openings because your week is so stressful and you didn't manage things up until Wednesday night? Are you missing out on sleep? All those sorts of things. So it's a coaching and nutrition and training that aims to overhaul their life and get their groove back. And most of the time it works. It's fantastic. So I know all of this because I sort of went through a similar process myself some years ago. My kids were toddlers. I've got 2 kids who are now 10 and 12. They were toddlers. I was working 10, 12 hours a day, running around between school and kids sport and trying to run a household. And, I do believe that women over 35 do tend to still pick up most of the housework. Mm-hmm. It keeps us really, really busy. Mm-hmm. We do most of the cooking. So anyway, I found a way to sort of get back into my fitness and just commit to it. And within sort of a couple of years, I'd sort of gone through enough to actually figure out how to nail my nutrition, and I've sort of got a really big visual change happening very quickly. So in the space of about 4 to 6 months, I sort of went from kind of...
Is that the picture you posted just recently? Or was
No, that
something
was only a
else?
year ago. This
Okay,
was like some
cool.
years ago before
Oh, okay,
that.
there was a
So,
different one,
but I basically sort of just finally honed down on my nutrition, and I sort of got to that point where you get, where you get lean enough and you actually get those sort of like muscle definition. And everybody, all of my friends, all the school mums were all saying, what have you been doing? Tell me, what do you do?
What's the magic?
What's the magic? What's the secret? And until then, I kind of thought that I was on my own with all of this. I didn't realise that women are still struggling a lot up in here. I kind of thought most people were just sort of happy with how they were, or they didn't really care, or they had too many problems to pay attention to it, or whatever.
It's a priority for them.
But it's actually, women are really confused.
Yeah.
You've got the clients, they're very, very confused. And I just wanted to fix that for them. That's why I do it. So
that's great.
The what I do was all of that. The why I do it is because it took me a little while to figure it out for myself, and I've got a background in food and cooking, and have kind of always been moderately fit. For the women that haven't got that, they really need help, and I just want to save them from. I want to give them the shortcuts to get, not shortcuts, but the knowledge to get from from zero to where they want to be, sort of in 6 to 12 months. So yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and what I'm hearing is you're trying to, as well with, or what you are doing with these women, is helping them with adherence, putting something together for them in a balanced way that is more effective, more efficient, and actually connecting with their wants and needs, where perhaps, like you said, it's been put into the back of my mind, or maybe it's been made not to be a priority because, as you said, with the demographic or the idealism of relationships, the females fall into a said role, not always, but that's the way it is, and maybe they think, oh well, I don't have the time, or I can't do this, and there's all these limiting beliefs. By going through and perhaps redefining and re-educating, you're able to present these women, as you said earlier, with other solutions which are still able to meet their goals, but in a way where they can actually implement it, still look after their kids, still provide, still do what they need to do, whatever it might be, which I think is really powerful, especially in this day and age. And because you've lived it as well, I think that it always helps, because you probably would get more respect from women. Not to say that someone who hasn't got kids and hasn't been in that position can't, but if you've lived it yourself, there's always more experience to draw from, and I think you can gather more empathy because you can actually connect and go, well, I do know what it's like to have kids, I do know what it's like to be time poor, and be married and go through all of those scenarios.
Absolutely, and I think for that reason, they're the kind of women that are attracted to me as their trainer and nutritionist. I do have a lot of clients who have had, without categorising or being offensive, but young single male trainers, and they're just like, here's a meal plan, just eat this. You just do it.
It's very,
you got a goal, you just do it. You smash your goal.
one-dimensional.
That's it. It's very one-dimensional. They don't understand hormonal cycles, stress of kids, running between, sometimes you've literally got 5 minutes to get in and out of the house to get to the next sport event or the whatever, with 2, 3, 4 kids, juggling them. It's really difficult. And to have a trainer who gets all of that, my clients end up saying to me, I don't know how you do it all. I say, well, I can teach you how I do it all. And that's the thing that really gets them over the line with me, because they see everything that I do.
You lead by example.
Yeah,
which is a philosophy close
I'm
to
not
my
doing like, for their benefit. It's just my life. I have to do it like that. It just doesn't work if I don't. So, it's just how it works. So to teach them how to juggle all those things, how to take a, transportable snack, how to have a meal plan that's got things that you can make a batch of 24 in it and freeze them, and then just grab it out of the freezer on the way to soccer practice, that the kids will eat as well, that you don't have to make separate food for yourself, which is a huge thing. They just say, oh, I don't want to have to, so many of them, they get in touch and they say, I don't want to have to cook separate meals. I don't want you to cook separate meals.
You don't have to.
You should be eating well, and your family should also be eating well. And that's sort of, a thing that women have. They sort of tend to self-blame or like, I'm the one that's overweight, I'm the one with the problem, I need to do better, I'm not good enough, I need to be more motivated. It's like, well, and I always ask them as part of their lifestyle things, what's the rest of your family like? What's your partner like? Do they train? Are they fit? Are they, how's their weight, management? What are your kids like? How old are they? What sort of foods do they eat? I don't tend to ask, are your kids overweight or not, because it's a very subjective thing for women.
Yeah.
Most people whose children may be carrying a little excess weight might not see it, and they'll say no. But more so I just ask, what do your children eat? Because, and that should be really the focus too. It's not so much if your children are overweight, or even if you're overweight, not you need to do something about your weight. It's you need to eat better.
Get to the root cause.
So that your weight will then, find its balance. Like losing weight is not a goal. Eating better is a goal, So with women, these women, I tend to always try and sort of focus on family nutrition for them, because I don't want them to have to cook something separately. And I always ask them, what things have you tried in the past to lose weight? And they've done, Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, all the sort of the typical big weight loss industry things. And they're like, oh, it worked. I'm like, well, if it worked, why are you talking to me?
It worked
because I couldn't stick to it, because I got sick of eating separate food, or I couldn't afford it, or whatever. You don't have to make separate food. Good lean protein sources, vegetables, whole grains. That's what everybody in your family should be eating. Why shouldn't they be eating the same thing as you? And then so you have women that come to me and they'll say, I remember one mum at soccer practice years ago said, we're talking about what our kids eat. Because that's a huge thing. Like you pick your kids up to school, you get home, you get them changed, you get out to soccer practice. If you've got multiple kids in sport, it can be 3 or 4 hours that you're out at training, 2 or 3 or 4 nights a week. Then you've got the games on Saturday. So especially if they're playing different sports, and then you've got to move between fields and all these sorts of things. So oftentimes you'll see parents leave their soccer training or their whatever it is, their sport, touch footy or whatever, straight to the pizza shop, straight to the drive-thru on the way home. It's like, wouldn't you just make a double dinner on a Sunday and then eat it again on Tuesday? And they'll say things like, oh, my husband won't eat leftovers. Like, well, if you only give him leftovers, he can learn to cook himself if he doesn't want to eat leftovers. You don't have to get drive-through for the kids because the husband won't eat the leftovers. It's just sort of re-educating your role in the family to not always be 100 million% responsible for catering to everyone's tastes. And one of the soccer mums said to me, oh, so-and-so, their child, oh, he'll only eat chicken nuggets at the moment. What do I do? Stop buying chicken nuggets. He will eat something else eventually. He might be hungry for a couple of nights in a row. He's not going to die of starvation. But if you keep giving him chicken nuggets, he's going to yell and scream for chicken nuggets. So, or make healthier chicken nuggets, crumb chicken breast or whatever. So there's all these little things that women can do for their families that will carry over into their own nutrition. And that's what I like to try and teach them.
The grey areas as well, I find. And I'm glad you've mentioned these things, because they're often not the most obvious concepts, but they're the ones that people really struggle with because they're real life problems. Like you said, there's this whole concept of, people come to nutritionists or come to trainers for help, and the fact that, hey, how much is a meal plan? Can I have a meal plan like it's some sort of magic pill that's going to get them to where they want to go? And as we know, it's not. It's a tool, one of many, which can be useful in the right scenario, but often it isn't, because we want to focus on habits and behaviors. And like having these conversations as you were talking about, and going through these little verbiages of what is actually happening, and they've forgotten the role, I think, a lot of the time, or people really forget what is within their control is probably a better way of phrasing it. I use an example, you just talked about a lady or a mum who says, oh, my husband won't eat leftovers, or my child will only eat this. Now, I'm not saying things have to be rough or bad or disrespectful, but ultimately, if he is your child, then you should have some say and control and take the lead on that. I remember being in a restaurant years ago, and I was taking an order as a waiter, and a particular lady was saying to her son, like, come on, like, make your mind up, what do you want? Is it Coke or this and that? And I was thinking in my head, but when I didn't have a choice. I got what I was given at that age, and I'm not saying it has to be like that, but you should direct and cultivate. That should be a treat. It shouldn't be he gets to choose between chips and this. It's like, give him something good and make him learn at that age that you don't always get what you want, which is a good skill in itself and a good tool, and that foods like that are not the best to fill up on. But like you said, people, they give in. They sit down, they give the kid the iPad straight away because it's easy. And we have to do what's right, not what's easy a lot of the time. And I'm not a parent, so I can't perhaps speak on the topic as well as other people with kids or like kids, but I make these observations and I see a lot of people just really giving in because it's too hard. And I think we need to give people that roadmap like you're having and going, hey, well, maybe you're so far in it that you can't see it. So here's you with no emotional attachment to a degree to the scenario going, hey, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? Because right at the minute you only see option A and B, but there's so many ways that we can tackle this, but it is a series through meaningful conversations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love that example you gave about the kids in the restaurants. So I, disclaimer, am not claiming to be the perfect parent.
Well, no one is.
All parents.
Is there any?
There's always moments where
thing?
you wish you had done things better, whatever. But I grew up, my background, I grew up in the country. I was born in Sydney. My mum moved to Tasmania for a bit of a tree change. Translation hippie when I was like 2.
I was just gonna say, there you are.
2, and I grew up on a farm. We grow our own vegetables. We killed our own, meat. We sent it to the abattoir from our cows and sheep and all that stuff. Very wholesome. Partly because we were very, very poor as well, so we didn't have treats and things like that. But we lived in a small country town, and there was one Chinese restaurant, a Chinese takeaway, and then there was one good restaurant that you went to for birthdays and special occasions, right?
Like more of a fine
like
dining.
Once a year, fine dining, yeah, sort of. It was a great way to grow up. But in Tasmania, interestingly, so I never had fast food when I was a kid growing up. It didn't really exist. So there was never actually a McDonald's in Tasmania until 1991.
Interesting.
Because
I was born,
there was a man who had a burger shop. Now this might be urban myth, but I'm quite sure. Had a burger shop called McDonald's. His name was McDonald in Launceston, up in the north of the state. And Tasmania couldn't get the trading name. McDonald's couldn't get the trading name in Tasmania until 1991 when he closed his thing. So I'm sure they tried to buy him out before then.
Yeah.
Maybe they did buy him out eventually. I don't know. So I had McDonald's twice when I was a kid when we went to Melbourne to visit my grandparents, and that was the treat that they took me to McDonald's as a treat. And I didn't like it. It just the taste was just not food to me. It was awful, which doesn't say don't mean to boast, but my point is when I had my children, because McDonald's is Hungry Jack's, whatever, any kind of fast food, it's never been really something that's been brought into our house. I don't consider it to be food. So it's not an option.
It becomes a thing if you make it a thing.
Yeah,
if you don't know about it, you don't know
well,
about
it's just not. It's just never been an option. We all eat pizza every now and then and things like that, but just that sort of drive-through fast food thing, it's just never been a thing for me. So, and this is the point I wanted to make to mums, is when you have a child, you have one chance until they're about 12 or 14 years old to have complete control of what they eat. So you have that one chance to educate the palate to good food, and so that by the time they get around to making their own choices as teenagers and going out with friends and doing that sort of thing, that kind of food tastes weird and foreign to them. So my children I have 2. They've never eaten McDonald's. Well, the older boy, he was 12. Until last year, he's now tasted it. And that came about because he came home from school one day and he said, all my friends were talking about what's their favourite fast food, and they were like this and that, and he said, I've never had those things. And he said, and I felt really left out. I said, okay, well, fair enough, I knew that this day would come.
Yes.
What would you like to do? What would you like to do about that? And he goes, well, I said, do you want to try it? He goes, can I? I said, of course you can. Like, I've never said you can't. We've just never had it.
Yeah. So just because there's other options.
It's just not awesome. So of course we'll go. So took him. He ate it. Same reaction as me when I went to Melbourne as a kid. Like, that's not food. This is disgusting. And I just inwardly, yes, it's worked. I've educated his palate to be, good tasting food. My daughter still won't try it. She's just like, no, I don't want to eat that crap or whatever. So my brainwashing has worked.
Out of interest? What did he get?
I think he had a cheeseburger or a junior burger or something. He said the chips were all right, but the oil tasted funny. Because we usually, if they get chips, it's usually restaurant sort of quality oil, not that sort of reheated fast food oil. But yeah, he just hasn't wanted it ever since. So my job as a parent is done. But the point is, like, taste is it's not just about your taste buds. It's a combination of smell, it's the texture in your mouth, it's all these different things. And I know lots of people say they don't like mushrooms because they don't like the texture. It's all these sort of combination of things, and actually the taste, the perception of taste is formed in, your prefrontal cortex. So with children, you can, they might not like they say they don't like broccoli. It's that smell of that cruciferous vegetable smell that can be a little bit assaulting, So you can try them all these different things. But like you say, when you've got the kid in the restaurant, you don't get to choose from the whole soft drink menu. You can have water or watered down apple juice or soda water if you're one of my kids, Even the kids' menu, no, you can't
It's
have the
crap.
nuggets and chips or the sausages and chips. You can have an entree from the main menu.
Yeah.
That's way better. I would rather pay for you to do that
Yeah.
than have you, eat. And they won't even eat nuggets anyway. They don't like the taste of them. So, but the thing that it's interesting though, most people who, I'll make gross generalizations, but most people who become intentionally pregnant, so they plan to have a baby, they want to have a baby, they do focus on their health for a few months beforehand before they start trying. You might get a few that will say, I want to have a baby, need to lose weight or whatever. We start taking the prenatal vitamins. When we're pregnant, we take all the vitamins that we need to do. No, I can't eat that. I'm going to eat that. It's good for the baby, all these different things. The baby's born. We either make their own food or we buy the organic baby pouches and we put them in the bamboo nappies and we do all this stuff. And because we believe it's so important to give our child the best start in life.
And then it all goes
And
out
then
the window.
all of a sudden, somehow, fast forward to prep and people are having McDonald's kids' birthday parties. What the hell happened in that time? Like, where did we have started with our best intentions, but then life gets in the way and it becomes easier. And we are very much sort of swayed by what all the other kids are doing. You don't want your child to be the odd one out or the weird one. You want them, and even with my kids, I never made a point of them saying, oh, my children won't eat McDonald's, or, I've never sort of really brought it up. If they took them on play dates, I didn't have a list of foods that they are allowed to eat and not eat. It was just like, you can eat whatever you want when you're out of the house because I want you to be a normal kid. But at home, when I've got control of 99% of the food that goes in your mouth, you're eating proper normal food. And it sets them up, it sets up their palate for life. So the problem with kids being overweight or having poor health, it's not so much, it's kind of masked because it's not so much when they're younger, up to sort of about, puberty. There's sort of not a lot of overweight children in that age group, although it is increasing. It's from puberty onwards that's when it really sort of, the overweight can start being a real problem. As I said, children have more, children themselves have more control over their choices. They get the Slurpees from 7-Eleven on the way to school and all those sorts of things. But it's also, hormonal changes, being super hungry because you're growing so fast and all those sorts of things. So that's the pathway from going from sort of normal weight children that parents don't really pay that much attention to, even though their food habits aren't great. They're like, oh, well, they're not overweight. It's kind of okay. They can have the nuggets and the pizza and the whatever. To all of a sudden being teenagers, and then they look like they've got a weight problem, and then the girls are starting to get worried, and the guys are starting to get worried even more so now. All the body dysmorphia getting around with guys, and Instagram isn't awesome for that sort of thing, and the pressure on kids to look a certain way. So coming back full circle, the mums that come to me oftentimes are being in their mid to late 30s, 40s. They've got children that are becoming teenagers that are starting to have weight problems, and they say to me like, can you do a meal plan for my child? I'm like,
your child's not going to stick to a meal plan, man.
First of all, I'm not actually qualified because I'm not medically trained as a nutritionist, as a dietitian. So hats off to dietitians. They've spent a few more years at university than I have. They can do that. But you would never give a child a meal plan. A, they're not going to follow it. B, the whole family needs to eat the same. Otherwise, the child's not going to sit there and eat their meal plan food while their brothers and sisters are hurrying into the corn chips and the whatever.
It needs to be a collective.
It needs to be a family thing. So, the meal plan, like you say, it is a magic pill, isn't it? People just think you give them the meal plan, they just have to follow it and life will be perfect.
Yeah,
but
it
doesn't
reminds
work
me,
like that.
I was working with a younger gentleman and his mum came to me because, she goes, oh, he's overweight, this, that and the other. And what I realised, long story short, without going too in depth, is that he wasn't really at the root cause of it all. It was actually his mum. And I had to call her out a few times. She would say, oh, he's not losing weight, it's this, that and the other. And I said, well, is it true that you took him for this, you took him for this, you took him for that? I'm like, you do realise you are feeding him all of this food and you're expecting me to give your son loads of cardio? No. There's a bigger problem at play here, habits and behaviour-wise, and we need to change. It's not fair. So how do you think he feels when you sit down and eat a plate of chips in front of him and he can't have some? Or then you conversely take him out to get fast food. I'm like, that is incongruent with what you want. So again, broader strokes, habits and behaviours, but again, it wasn't a magic pill, it wasn't a quick fix, it wasn't give me the answers. It was, well, maybe you need to take a look in the mirror and we need to start with some more broader strokes of how you conduct yourself and your family. That's a hard decision to have, to a family member that has come for you for help, but those expectations need to be set. And some good points about how it comes full circle. And it is a vicious cycle. We all probably know the person at school who was always eating fast food. I know a couple of friends, they always had money for the cafe or the corner shop or wherever you live, whatever you want to call it. And I was always quite jealous of that. But so, because my parents brought me up of it, it was a treat. Like every Friday you get 20p, you go to the, you can have some sweets. And I had balance in my nutrition. You know, sometimes we had dessert, sometimes we didn't. And I look back and all of the foods were mainly whole foods. I was speaking to a client this morning. She's got a young child. We were just speaking about it before it turned on the mic. And I said, you know, it's something I took for granted, but I got included in the one because I was curious and quite full of energy. But I was always like, what are you doing, Mum? What are you doing? My mum's Italian. She's got that Latin background. Food and culture is so quite fortunate there. But the cultural differences, the demographics, the finance, the monetary, you know, like the financier or the financial status of a family. There are so many elements which contribute to the end result or the health of the family. Because as you said, it depends on where they're at and where that starting point is. You were quite subdued from all of the fast food. My parents were into health and fitness. I was lucky. I could have had parents that weren't. I remember getting McDonald's though, and it was a treat. It was always a treat. And again, I looked at families who had it all every day, but I got to that age where I wanted to start to look better. And what I thought my mum and dad were doing, I was like, oh, that's normal. Like all families have fruit and vegetables and, you know, they're made to eat healthy and these are sometimes foods, but no, it wasn't the case. There was families who were having fast food every day, but I looked at their health and now obviously with the education I have, I see, you know, where some of those people are at and it's such a shame. And even some of those people now have come back to me all those decades later to help them out with their family or their health status because it's like 1 degree out is now 100 degrees off course because you can only get away with eating it so much. And even people go, oh, well, he looks healthy. I'm like, yeah, but just because someone might not have a lot of what you appear to have body fat internally, it doesn't mean that they are healthy. Because, you know, there's always that person who's like eating all of this fast food, but they're not fat. Oh, you're lucky you get away with it. It's like, no, you don't get away with it. The body still processes it. There's still internal repercussions of all of this. But for me, the interesting one about McDonald's, this is strange, right? Because I actually like the taste of McDonald's. To some degree, right? This is weird. And I don't know if this is a psychological anchor. Like, I really like cheeseburgers from McDonald's. Like, but I don't eat it because it doesn't make me feel good. My body almost rejects food at this point. Like, I don't drink much alcohol these days. I'm very attuned to what I like. I used to do a lot of food challenges because I don't do that anymore, really. I just can't tolerate a lot of really high processed food. Like my body just doesn't process KFC. It just doesn't. Like it does, but it's because I'm so aware of how I feel, I eat it and I'm like, oh no, and it's not worth it. And it's the same with McDonald's. I could probably eat a cheeseburger or a little bit because the totality of food I eat, if it's within the greater, you know, amount, the body's like, yeah, we'll tolerate a bit of that. But if I eat a lot of it, I very quickly get a headache, it goes through me. It's almost like my body's like, what are you doing? But the cheeseburger I actually like. And I'm not saying it's better than like a grill burger or a normal burger, but some of it I'm like, I can see why people are addicted to this. But really salient point, as you mentioned, is I use the analogy, if you don't realize how underslept you are till you're well slept. So a lot of people can't actually comprehend how their palate will change because they're so far gone. And it's the same with, this is an interesting, porn versus real sex. And the kids are so desensitized to it that they've actually forgot or they don't know what real touch is like. And people don't know what real food tastes like. But it takes time for the body to readapt. And then you go, oh, actually this doesn't, I'm now aware. This doesn't make me feel good. This actually doesn't taste as good as, say, something like a homemade burger or a grill burger or something which is more qualitative rather than something that's highly processed, which is interesting. So, yeah, I find there's some different avenues there where certain foods can still taste good, but that can be a psychological thing. But then certain foods no, or even the effect of it afterwards. And you go, actually, it was good for a very short-term time, and now I'm just regretting that. Which is an interesting ideology. But like you said, being able to set those expectations early, I think that's really important. And you know, and look, there's no perfection as parents. Like, and you can't tell people this is how you raise your child, this is the way to do it. It's like, no, but hey, if we're looking at this avenue of health, then here's some things to consider, some recommendations and considerations around what we might want to do. And again, the broad strokes are so simple. Let's talk about, and I think this is quite good because we've just come through New Year and Christmas, and a lot of people are like really a little bit disgruntled, or not disgruntled, maybe disheartened at their progress because they didn't track or they ate different foods. And I'm like, well, okay, but let's actually break that down. Just because you had different foods and different combinations, was it actually that bad? Like, go back through and break it down. Oh, I still ate lean meat. I still ate carbohydrate. Yeah, I'm like, you just had it in a different order, a different quantity. And maybe you were so indoctrinated now in tracking, which is now reversed. It's become a negative thing because now you can't, and this is why we need to learn to eat off the meal plan and, understand how to eat intuitively in the broad strokes of nutrition. And now it always doesn't have to look the same every day. It can appear in different order and quantities. And then when people look back, they go, oh, actually. And I'm like, yeah, so maybe, you didn't move as much as you wanted. Maybe you didn't eat the same food in the right order, but is it really that bad? Just because it wasn't tracked or just because it wasn't on your regime. I think structure can get people frustrated. And I can connect with that, being someone who's very organized and being sort of a Virgo Leo. Like, I'm very like, oh, it has to be, but I think we have to sometimes lose that. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's progress.
Well, you would know the amount of people that you have to coach away from that perfectionist thinking. If there's a problem with a meal plan is you're kind of saying to somebody, this is the only way, and if you follow this, it will work. And then they think if they stray off that it won't. Yeah. But just getting back to your point about like why you like cheeseburgers, and that's another thing that most, and I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but there is an enormous amount of research and development that goes into developing these foods. Have you heard of Bliss Point? There's a thing called Bliss Point, which is a sort of perfect combination of sugar, fat, and salt.
Oh, like to make the hedonic foods.
Yeah. To make things highly, highly palatable and trigger a dopamine release that is similar
it's the same with the smell.
Yeah,
Sex.
cocaine. Yeah,
cocaine
like
and
heroin.
It gives you that I'm addicted to it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And actually, the guy that developed Bliss Point did it as a function of developing soft drinks, like in the science lab, research and developing soft drinks. So there's a really good documentary. I can't remember what it's called, but it's Coca-Cola going to Brazil, and so it's about how fast food is making these third world countries now catching up to the Western world with their obesity rates. Coca-Cola went to Brazil and sponsored a whole bunch of high schools in a region to go to have basically sort of a high school Olympics of all these different sports. Yeah. And these are super poor kids that didn't even have real soccer balls, let alone grass to play on. Just really no chance of ever competing in organised sport. Even though obviously they idolise their football and everything over there. And so Coca-Cola went and just created this enormous 3-day festival or something and paid for all these schools to travel to places they'd never been on buses to the next town before and all these sorts of things. And they filmed it, and the documentary makers are saying to the kids, you realise this is marketing, don't you? And they're like, yes, but we don't care. We love Coca-Cola so much, and I love Coke and I'll always drink Coke. And they're buying customers for life. They will imprint on that child, we made that best moment of your youth and probably your life happen thanks to Coca-Cola. And so whenever they're given a choice, they will always go for Coca-Cola. And the same thing with McDonald's, the happy place, the playground, the kids.
Clever, right?
You would go, we play, whatever. And so, but it's not just the fast food places, it's all food now. Food manufacturing has gone completely nuts. It's just totally bonkers.
Massively.
They're almost convincing you that you don't have time to make food because it's so easy. We can buy it here, and that's why you don't need to cook. So now people go, I haven't got time. Yeah. It takes 20 minutes to chop some veggies and chuck a bit of meat in the oven. That's it. It takes 20 minutes to go drive down to the road to go through the drive-through or to go to the supermarket and buy packaged stuff. So the problem that I think, especially as teenagers, that parents have now is trying to lure their children away from that kind of marketing. It's like you don't have kids, but I'm sure you've been out in the town at some point and you've had a mate, imagine it's your best mate in the world that you absolutely love, that you'd give up a kidney for, right? You love them, and they're really super drunk and they're doing really potentially bad things. They can't make decisions, they're completely irrational, they're over emotional. They want to walk on the ledge of a bridge or play chicken with the cars or whatever. Of course you're going to stop them from doing that because you don't want them to get hurt or die. That's the kind of rationality you're dealing with a toddler. Is they're just their brain just doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, they just want that. You know, if my kids never had a tantrum in a supermarket, not because I'm an awesome parent, but because I never gave them anything in a supermarket to have a tantrum over. So they didn't never know that chocolate came in those red wrappers near the checkout because I never bought them one and gave them one. They didn't know what they were until they could read. So they didn't have that kind of, oh, I want more of that thing that I got the last time. So when you've got a toddler that's absolutely behaving like your drunk best mate and you can't you can't reason with them, it's easier, and that's what you're saying about parents, it's easier to give in. Of course it's easier, especially in public, because you don't want your kid to be the one that's screaming. You know, you want them to shush. You know it's inconvenient for everyone. You know, you're going to get filthy looks from everyone else in the shops. You know, you can't discipline them the way that you would at home because you're not allowed to yell and scream at your kids anymore and all those sorts of things. So parents will often go for what's easier. And even when I was on maternity leave, I watched a lot of Dr. Phil, and he would have these parents on with these sort of wayward teens, whether they were, you know, drugging or drinking or whatever. And he would say to them, you know, where do they get the money for the drugs? Or like, where do they get the car? Where do they get their phone? Like, well, I pay for their car and their phone. It's like, why? He goes, well, because I don't want them to end up in a ditch or whatever. Like, okay.
Fueling the problem.
You realise that now the money that they have, that they're not spending on cars and phones, they're spending on drugs. So why are you doing that? It's like, because it's easier for you than to live with the pain or the argument or the guilt of them hitting rock bottom.
Yes.
You don't want to see them hit rock bottom because you can't deal with the guilt. So who are you really saving here? Are you saving yourself from your own guilty feelings? And same with parents. Are you saving yourself from your own embarrassment in the supermarket or wherever? Like, of course it's hard to have a screaming kid, but it's harder to have a child that becomes an overweight teen, that becomes a morbidly obese adult, that dies an early death because they just weren't set up with good behaviours and good values from the beginning. So
this is it. And that's where it all stems from.
Yeah.
And then at some point, you know, you've got to be your own parent, but if you've had a backwards foot, you know, if you've not had the best start, and there's no such thing as the best, it's a lot harder, isn't it? Because you are the byproduct. I mean, you are completely dependent in those early stages. So if you're brought up to believe in God, or if you have fast food, then that's your default.
Yeah.
I think another good example here for the listeners and for people to think about is the whole shame that comes with it, and that it's okay to ask for help in this realm, even for, so I found that when I moved out of home, I was living in, one instance I was living with my business partner in an apartment. Now he came from a different background where his mum was Asian, and he'd you know, learned how to cook, and he understood food, and he was health conscious like me, and we trained him. We pretty much were on the same page with food. And again, you know, vegetables, all of this was just basic stuff. We'd meal prep, we'd do all that. It was easy. It was second nature to us, and training and all of that. But we had a flatmate who was completely the opposite in every sense of the word. And we didn't, you know, make him feel uncomfortable. We didn't try and force anything on him because I don't believe in that. I don't think everyone should have to do the same. But, you know, it was a lot of processed foods. Didn't really eat too much. You know, it was, when he did try to cook, he was burning meat all the time and this, that, and the other. And anyway, we sort of, you know, I put it out there, hey, if you ever, you know, you want any help, like he knew what I did and all of that. But I remember one day, and it was about after a year, and we built some more rapport, and he sort of opened up to me, and he goes, oh, you know, like I actually don't know how to cook. Like I don't have any idea. And he wanted me to help him and his girlfriend because they'd put on quite a lot of weight when they got to get together, and they put on more weight, and they're like, oh, can you help us? And I said, yeah, sure. You know, but it was that, then it was appropriate because he wanted to change, where before it wouldn't have, you know, I always put it there like, hey, like this, if you do, like I'm here if you've got any questions. But he said, look, I actually don't know how to cook. And he was, I think, the third child. And everyone, he told me that sort of like, you know, he got it easy and this, that, and the other. But he might have got it easy, but he didn't get any attention. And therefore, there was other issues with that. But he just was left to his own devices. So we didn't have any idea. So he says, I actually burned the steak because I don't know how to cook it. And eat everything out of a packet because I don't know how to prepare food. His girlfriend was Brazilian. She was phenomenal in the kitchen, but didn't understand the composition of perhaps energy balance and some other basic nutritional sort of protocols. So it was better, and that helped him realize about food, and she helped him because she would prepare a lot of food, but together they wanted to understand it a little bit more, because she also couldn't understand why she was putting on weight, but she didn't realize that a lot of her food was just really calorific, and there was no exercise, and there was very low protein, and everything was sort of, as good as it might have tasted, was perhaps a little bit too rich for everyday sort of food. So it was about going, well, how can we still use some of that, but maybe we need to swap some ingredients around, we need to swap some quantities, we need to include some other varieties of foods. And I just think how many people are out there who are perhaps in that circumstance where I've noticed from coaching people, there's always this disconnect between you work with someone and you go, okay, cool, one of the first things we do, we might say we create a food diary, we look at someone's habits and behaviors, we seek to understand, we don't just give them a meal plan, we have some broad strokes in place. And then we go, right, this is what they didn't teach us at university. This person actually doesn't know how to cook. Well, hang on a minute. It doesn't matter if you give them a meal plan because they still can't put it together. So we're defeating the purpose here. So how do we do that? Well, it was like, okay, well, now we need all these resources. So when I started at EMF, I thought, well, how can we do some cooking classes? But how can we do it in a way which is not make these recipes? How can we actually, what's protein? What's carbs? What's fat? How do you prepare veg? How do you store meat? Like, it was so simple, but we realized that they're the things people needed. It wasn't going straight to a Jamie Oliver, and as good as I love Jamie, make this recipe. It was people didn't just know how to prepare food in general. They just had no idea. And we assumed, and I assumed in the early days of coaching, people know about food, they can put it together, but actually a lot of people don't. And the people who come to us who are really motivated, or the people who do comp prep, and no disrespect to them, but they're easy. Aside from the fact that they might have eating disorders, and then there's that side of things to fix or to address. A lot of those people are already fit, they're healthy, they've got good habits, they've got routines. There's a reason why they do what they do, because they already know how to prepare healthy food, they know how to train, they understand sleep. Where your average person perhaps doesn't know that, and they're not generally going to admit it to you. So it's about going, well, how do you bridge that gap between getting them to prepare their meals? Well, maybe that's not feasible straight away. Maybe it's not fair to go, hey, by the way, this is your meal plan, and this is what you do, and this is the meal prep, and this is how you're gonna. So I thought, for me, it was about creating content that could actually break down those gray areas in a way, in a step-by-step process, where you could get someone who, depending on their financial status and their skill set, could go, okay, now I understand what protein is. Now I understand how the supermarket works, how to go around, what to look for, how to read a food label, what things I should concern myself in buying and things that I don't need to concern myself, save money, save time. How would I organize it and put it together if I was gonna make it again in bulk or in batches? And I'd put videos, and they are the most useful resources to these days because they are the cement to the bricks of which keep people, it always falls apart. And that goes back to what we first said about, we've got Jenny Craig, we've got Isogenics, we've got these, and they work in a short-term instance because they just put someone in a calorie deficit. And that's easy, but it isn't sustainable, and especially not for health. It's a short-term fix which doesn't actually teach you anything. It's the give a man a fish, teach a man a fish, and we need to teach people to fish, metaphorically. We need to teach people habits and behaviors and skill sets around food to facilitate something that's more sustainable over time. And then, hopefully, they can pass that on to the next generation, and we can start to perhaps correct the problem, which is obesity, because I do not like the whole health at every size. That's a load of bullshit. It's vague. It's like BMI.
No, it's a cop-out.
So vague.
Yeah.
It's so vague. It's like, it doesn't mean that you have to be this exact one place, but everything has context, and there's a time and a place for most things. And it's the whole, you probably get it all the time, the questions from your females like, what's the best food for this? It's like, okay, well, you can't just say that's a shit question to someone, but you have to say, hey, look, perhaps we need to look at not what's best, but based on our goals, let's start asking some different questions. Let's have again, critical thinking mindset, but like, how do we actually teach people about that without, overwhelming them, etc.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the BMI thing because, we say that we've got this sort of obesity crisis, which I think crisis it's a bit of a nothing word. People are like, oh my gosh, with crisis, no one's paying attention to crisis anymore.
Yeah, tactics. Well, not with the big C word, COVID. Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. But
Cry wolf.
Yeah, exactly. But the statistic is we've got about 70% of the population overweight or obese, and that's about half and half. So 35% overweight, 35% obese. What classifies as overweight or obese? Overweight is BMI 25 to 30, obese is over 30. BMI for people in the
Just a quick one, guys, before we carry on with the podcast. For any of you who are interested in taking your health and physique to the next level and you want to remove the guesswork, you're not quite getting the progress that you want, you're not seeing what you want to see in the mirror, and you're not feeling like you're really moving in the right direction, then click the link in the bio below, the apply button, where you can contact me. We can organize a free consultation, no obligation, and discover whether it's a good fit as coach and client. All right, back to it.
Fitness industry not relevant. Obviously, as you know, you're heavier with more muscle mass, the lean factor doesn't count. But for the most people walking around, and especially the people that do have a weight problem, it's kind of an okay indicator to at least go, well, if you weigh, more than is recommended for your height, you're probably overweight. It's kind of a probably. So what that translates as, average height woman, say 165 centimeters. I'm 160, bit taller than me, but not overly tall, 5'5", 5'6". 68 kilos puts you in the overweight category, and 82 or something kilos puts you in the obese category. Every client that comes to see me is at least 68 kilos or more. So there's a lot of people out there that have that. In terms of the cooking skills, it's, again, bring it back to the kids. It's something we need to teach them. You were lucky you have healthy, fit parents that you were around that kind of thing all the time. I was around that kind of thing all the time as a matter of necessity, which I'm also grateful for. My kids have been using sharp knives since they were 6-7 years old. You start them off on lettuce and things that are easy.
Teach them the skills.
But they've got to, we wrap our kids up in cotton wool these days. We try and protect them from the world. I'd rather protect them from obesity with a sharp knife than from cutting their fingers with a sharp knife.
Correct.
You know what I mean? So it's like you've got to teach them these things, even if it's uncomfortable. Teach them at least a week's worth of decent meals before they leave home. Spaghetti bolognese, chuck a roast in the oven. Simple stuff. Most people, and even adults actually, and that's what I find, like women sort of, I think for people in my generation, I'm late 40s, we very much grew up with, our parents were still in that housewife, husband goes to work type thing. Philosophy. So my grandparents were all like that, right? The women didn't work, the men did. They had one car per family, walked everywhere, made all their own food, that sort of thing. Women's work is in the home, men go out to work. So my mother has grown up with that. So she's brought that into her life as sort of a bit of a norm. And then that's how she, I say my mother, my generation's parents still follow that because that's what they were brought up with. My generation, so, let's say people in their 40s, quite likely if your husband is also in his 40s, he still believes that women do most of the housework and most of the cooking and all that sort of stuff. Then that sort of changed to now most women, or nearly all women, work full-time. Unless their kids are very, very young, and sometimes they're going back to work full-time when their kids are 6 weeks old. So all women work full-time. So these husbands that they're with, or partners that they're with, that still have that mentality of the women do the cooking and the housework and that sort of thing, the husbands are kind of left a bit more high and dry, like, oh, there's no food made because my wife's still at work. I'll grab the pizza, I'll get the fast food, I'll organise dinner. That's my husband's version of cooking, is like going and buying sushi for everyone. That's awesome, it gives me a night off.
Yeah. He means well.
But you can't do that 3 or 4 nights a week.
Yeah, the execution isn't that.
And it's expensive,
Well, I was going to say, some people can't afford to
Well,
do that.
just a family meal at even a, not awesome takeaway place like McDonald's is still like $50 for a family.
Even when they've got the specials on.
Yeah, it's a lot. So, $50 worth of meat and vegetables goes a lot further. But women who don't cook all the time, people who don't cook all the time weren't brought up with cooking, sort of like under 35s, that now it's not a normal thing to know how to cook. They don't even know the basic anatomy of meat, to cut the meat off a joint, or how to cut up a chicken.
It's kind of sad.
Even actually watching them try and peel carrots and cut vegetables, they're so uncoordinated. It's just not second nature
It's kind of sad.
to do those things. And it's not even that they don't know how to cook. They actually don't even know how to prepare the raw ingredients. They don't know, how to do something how to cut an onion without crying, or all these sorts of things. And it actually stops them from cooking, because cooking becomes such a laborious chore. Why wouldn't you just go out and buy it if it's already in a packet? you know, and then they're working full time as well and they haven't got the time to do it. So it's a compounding effect.
It is.
Yeah.
The path to least resistance always wins.
Yeah, it does. And we're
Always
humans,
wins.
we're always, you know, our brains are trained to survive, and we survive by expending as little energy as possible. So it's, you know, we're always going to take the easier option. It's a survival mechanism. But about the guilt and shame, though, too, and this is the thing, too, is when you say parents that are sort of like dragging their kids along into unhealthy eating, not because they don't love their kids, but it's because either their kids want it and they don't want to say no because they love the kids, or because they actually want it themselves and they want a partner in crime because it makes them feel a little bit less guilty about eating those foods when they know they shouldn't. So it's kind of like, oh, come on, let's go and get an ice cream, or come on, we'll treat you to some fast food or a pizza or something like that.
Or using it as a vice, as blackmail.
Yes.
Or as a reward, which is too often a reward. And it's like, oh, now food's a reward. And that's kind of in them. You've put it in such a way where you've reinforced that behavior, and we know with psychology what we can do with that. But now that's created actually a negative mindset.
Yeah.
Because it's, oh, that's the reward food, or that triggers that dopamine response, as you said earlier, and now that's a thing. Where it's like, well, hang on a minute, maybe it doesn't have to be the reward, or maybe it isn't a reward, that was just something that we had based on the time or the way we felt, and because we enjoyed it, that should be more of the reason, rather than, oh, we're using that as a vice now to trigger a behavioral pattern.
Yeah.
Which it is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I did, you mentioned before about the whole, the time and the money thing, which is good. And so there's a double-edged sword here, because I talked about meal prep companies and why they can be good and how they can bridge a gap, but it's almost like a lot of things that, let's use a really good metaphor. Okay, let's look at cosmetics, okay? So cosmetic injectables can be great and they're a tool, but when they come first, where men, women, I know it's more prevalent in the female society, but men are still doing it these days, where it's like, okay, now it's all going to be about looks. It's going to be about superficial, you know, elements. And no one has now, no, I say no one, but when people neglect the internal, are like, okay, like, am I kind? Can I do nice things for people? Like, can I hold a conversation? Have I got respect? All of these, I feel like that's been neglected now. And people are so focused on the external that they've forgot about the internal, which predicates the external. It's like, we've got it the wrong way round. And now people are reaching for the fast food more and more, where it's like, well, hang on, that was there initially for fun and recreation, perhaps going out, but also, you know, as a treat. And to add, and even the meal prep companies as well, like, that's a nice little crux. It can bridge a gap. It's financially viable if it's good food source and it helps people get started, but that can't be the main thing. Otherwise it doesn't work. So it's like, at some point we do need to learn some basic nutritional literacy. We do need to learn how to, I said, look, you don't have to be a philosopher and learn to be a great writer, but we do need to understand basic English and vocabulary. Like, it really does help us. And I think people don't even want to go learn that now, because they get so indoctrinated in, this is the way, this is how it's always been. And then to break that pattern, it gets harder and harder, because in our head, we build it up, and a lot of females, I just don't have the time. There's always an excuse. It's like, well, actually, if you had someone that held you accountable, even showed you, well, you just got started, you might find, one, it's not as hard as you think. You might even enjoy it, and it's going to then complement everything else that you're doing, just like an injectable. If you're going to do it, let it complement your look, but don't let it be the main and take away and have a massive set of lips on your face, or these eyelashes that look like you're going to fly away, or these boobs so big that they act as bouncy castles. Like, you know, it's, but you know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean.
If you can't tell that someone has something like that, or it complements, and we talk about food, the nutrition, then it's great. But when it takes away from it, that's the problem. And it's almost like the supplement thing. It's like the supplement is to fill any gaps but not met by nutrition, not to be the totality of the nutrition.
Yes.
And I think, kind of as a simple analogy, we've just got that as humans the wrong way around because of society, convenience, and media. And I did this video in Aldi where, I mean, I eat a lot of food, and I did, $100. It was less than $100, and it was 6 days worth of food, 3,500 calories a day. And it included fruits, vegetables. I did coconut rice, I did like a green curry. I did I think I did a stir-fry dish as well. And I showed them what I did for my breakfast and my sort of snacks. And people were just like, they're gobsmacked by it. And I'm like, yes, I went to Aldi. It took me literally 30 minutes to get the ingredients. I did it all in 1 hour. I don't expect people to do it in an hour. Call it 2 hours. But look at the time, look at the organization, the execution, the storage, the preparation. And when I did that video, I found, wow, that's when I started to go, I need to bridge this gap, because that's what people were they saw every step of it and they were like, oh, I didn't know how to combine the ingredients, prepare them, cook them, weigh them, if that was what you're going to do, store them. Like, it was all of these little things, but once they could see it, visualize it, and hear it, it's now achievable. And then it was, now go forth and make it your own. Change it. Go have a red curry. Change this meat to that meat. Change it. If you don't like meat, go plant-based. Like, it's just, the principle remains the same, but people just needed that guideline and that structure, which is what they think they're getting from the meal plan, but the meal plan doesn't tell them how to do it. It's just a list of foods in quantities on a piece of paper or whatever you deliver it on. Yep. Which is why it doesn't really ring home. And I think, while you were speaking, I just thought the prevalence of bringing I want to bring these master classes back. COVID kind of stopped a lot of that, but I really want to bring back these cooking classes because they were the most popular by far that we did. And I just think we kind of almost need to, like a lot of things in life, we need to go back to come forward again. Yep. It's the same with the phone, right? We're forgetting how to have conversations. It's almost like we kind of need to go back to basics, because I think we've got a little bit off track as humans, but perhaps we're going into deeper and darker topics at the moment.
I'm up for cooking classes. It's just you just do it like this. I mean, one of the biggest things that people, like you say, until they're shown, they're saying, I don't know how to batch things up. How do you batch it up so it's all right? It's like, it makes 12. Go and buy 12 identical sized containers and eyeball it. 12.
Or if you calculate it anyway, you're consuming those calories over 12 meals. So even if one's got more, it still equals the same.
It sort of still looks about right. If you want to get really finicky, just like weigh each one, but it's going to be about right. And that's the thing, people overthink it and they worry, and then they don't do it because it's like that analysis paralysis,
Yeah.
But
just do it.
Yeah, no, I think getting back to the cooking classes, definitely keen for that. We absolutely have to get people into it more. But it's just... to me, it's a great shame. It's a loss of culture, like 50 years ago, everyone was making food at home. Now, nobody does. And, people say that they don't have time, and you brought up the nails and the eyelashes and all these sorts of things. It takes an hour to get your nails done, and you've got to get it done every 3 weeks. It takes an hour or longer to get your eyelashes done, again, about every 3 weeks.
And the cost.
And then everyone, they've got the laminated brows, and they've got these things, and don't get me wrong, like I love a good spray tan, and, I've had some cosmetic surgery and things like that too.
We're in the health and fitness industry, we want to look good,
but
it's
a balance, and I would never prioritise that over not having my nutrition right. And even people that come to me and they're on like 7 HIIT classes a week or whatever, I would rather you drop 2 classes and spend that time in the kitchen than trying to exercise it off and eating the fast food. And even the ready meals, I make ready meals only because it was kind of a demand from people that I would give them the meal plan, show them how to prep it, and then they would just go, can't you just do it? It's just hard. Well, I'm making some for me, all right, I'll sell them to you. And then it sort of took off from there because it was a way for me to keep clients a little bit more on track. But it doesn't teach them anything, and they're not the ones that make permanent results, because all they're doing, you got the mums, and they're leaving their whole family on the same not great diet, and then they're just having their ready meal that they just microwave for 5 minutes. They're not in touch with their food. They're not teaching their family anything. Their family isn't on board with their health. So everything that their mum tries to do to be healthier, like get the kids to go for a walk or do anything, they don't want to do. The rest of the family doesn't want to do it because they're not invested in their health and their fitness. And you lose that whole experience of food, like the planning, thinking about what you want to make, the buying, the cooking, the experience, the smell while you're cooking. You would know, whenever you spend a long time in the kitchen, you're just not hungry at the end of it. You've just been around food all day and your senses have kind of been satisfied. Yeah. So you'll just eat a normal amount. But when you're not in touch with your food and you're kind of going from high stress, switching straight to now it's time to eat, that stress kind of goes into the food and you're kind of shoveling it all in. You're like, that's not enough and I've got to keep crunching, and then I'll reach for the potato chips. And you're not giving your human body a chance to be human and experience food the way it should be experienced. Correct. So you lose that sort of mental process of having eaten, even though the food's in your stomach, technically you've eaten, but the whole experience, it doesn't register with your brain, and your brain drives your behaviour. So it's something that you just, even family time with kids. So how many people just leave their kids on their screens while they throw something together in the kitchen, and then dinner, and they all come out? Get them in the kitchen with you. It makes things faster. Even little kids can wash up or empty the dishwasher or do things like that. It helps. Like, it's all help. Yes, and again, it's easier sometimes if they're not in the way, but having them in the way and having them learn gets you more help in the long run. You know, you need those little assistants to help you do everything at home. So we tend to not even give our kids chores anymore because, you know, they complain and their friends don't do chores and it's too hard, and it's just not setting them up for life. You've got to teach them how to adult. Something that came up, my daughter, bless her, she's 10 and awesome at everything, but just really messy. Like, she just can just walk into a room
She's creative.
and leave it, and it just...
Oh,
how the hell did you make so much mess in such a short period of time?
in general, just
No,
like
just
with anything, not just food?
like, she just leaves things wherever she, like, she opens something and goes off and does something else. She's just got a very short attention span, so she never really sort of thinks to look back. She gets kind of carried away. Oh, I might do this now, you know, and she's very creative. And I said to her, you know, I don't want to, like, squish your creativity, but you need to learn to be mindful of the people that are around you, the people that you live in this house with, and try and tidy up as you go.
Yeah.
And then she sort of looks at the mess she's made and she's like, oh, it just looks really, really hard, and it becomes overwhelming for her. I'm like, well, I need to teach you this because you can't go into being an adult and be overwhelmed to this degree with mess, because you're going to be really stressed and your life isn't going to run very well. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, well, if you grow up like this, so when you're an adult you're like this now, your life's going to be really hard. And she's like, doesn't it get better? Like, don't I just get neater as an adult? I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, well, you're neat. Like, I had to learn to be neat. I didn't just hit puberty and get neat.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's just, you need to learn and change as you go. And she went, oh, like, it didn't occur to her that she just thought I'm just being a kid, and then when you're an adult you become like me.
Yeah, you just wake up.
You know, you just wake up like that.
Well, you do though. You do.
Yeah.
I mean, even I, you know, thought that, and I think a lot of kids do. You think there's all of a sudden, like, things happen and you just wake up and bang, things change.
Yeah, and you're grown up all of a sudden. Like, no, you've got to work towards that. You've got to learn it, and it's the same thing with food.
Yes, it is, and it starts with starting.
Yes.
Which is the hardest bit.
Yeah.
It's like abseiling. It's just getting over the edge, but we fear all these things, but it's just a matter of going, well, and even with maybe that conversation with your daughter, just going, well, look, let's have a look at it now. Let's just start with one thing, right? So what should we start with? All right, let's put that back in it, that game, let's put it back in the box. Cool, that's one less thing. What next? And before you know it, and this is when we talk about start of the day, make your bed. People go, oh, why is that so important? I'm like, because how you do one thing is how you do everything, and that's the start. That gets the habits going. That's why habits and routines are so effective. Or we talk about morning routines and evening routines, and being able to go, what's the crux that kind of facilitates the rest of the, you know, the domino, if you will, where if you sort of end up getting into these, you know, vices where you are, oh, I'll just do that tomorrow, I'll do that tomorrow. Well, next minute that monopolies, and before you know it, you know, you're 3 years down the track and things are very much dissatisfying to where you want to be. And I think that's where a lot of people end up in life. I remember reading, it wasn't The Power of Habit, I don't think, it was another habit-based book. But anyway, I read the whole book and it had all these beautiful analogies and it was great. It was quite a hard read, to be fair, because it was very in-depth and it kept switching between the principle and it would go into all of these... 7
Habits of Highly Effective People?
No, it wasn't.
Because I found that one a bit of a struggle to read for that reason.
I've done that the same thing and I thought, oh, that was good, but it was a bit... But maybe that's because I needed to read it as well as audio it, and I audioed it, so maybe there was a visual cue that was missing there. But regardless, it was just very intertwining. But the last part of the book was gold, and I almost sort of thought, why didn't they just say that at the start? Because they almost, not to oversimplify it, but summarised it in such a metaphor, which was, for me, very visual, but very simple, which I think we can all really connect with. And what it said was that, you know, habits are like, if we are a fish in a stream, we will go with the current if we don't swim. And that is most people in life. They just go with the current, meaning whatever happens in their life, they don't realize it, but society puts things in, they'll do what the norm people do, they'll go with, and before you know it, you're down the stream and you're in a fucking part of the ocean or somewhere where you didn't even want to be. But understanding to make and break or create and discreate habits and behaviors gives the ability to swim. I want to go over there. Okay, well, it's going to take some resistance, but I can swim against the current. Or I need to go across the current back. I need to go downstream, upstream. That ability, and I just thought, wow, why didn't you just say that at the start? But to kind of get that across to people, I think is a really good way to picture why habits and behaviors are so important, because we don't realize, we think we're aware, but we're not. We're constantly being, you know, led by society and, again, the path to least resistance. So sometimes it's going, right, if it's the whole, like, there's so many nice little sayings to sum it up, right? Or, well, if you don't run the day runs you. Well, it's bloody well true, because most people are not happy in their life. They're not where they want to be, even though they don't define where they want to be, and that's a conversation for another time. But it's about going, right, well, what is something every day that I can do which gets me closer to the goal? Well, first of all, you have to define the goal. Okay, well, let's talk about it in the confines of what we've been discussing. The goal is to now make healthier habits and choices. Well, what does that look like? Where do I need to start? Okay, let's get the food. Or is it recruiting a trainer or a coach to even get the idea and build the goal, because I have no idea? That could be the option if you don't know where to start. And then from there going, right, okay, the first thing is let's go shopping. Let's start to swap the foods out. Let's start with I'm not even drinking water. All right, let's try and get some 3 liters a day. Like, there's all of these basic things. And people sort of, even though they don't want to do it, they try to do amazing things straight away. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. You just went from not wanting to do anything and saying everything's too hard, but now you want to do what I'm trying to do, or what someone 10 steps at. Just make it so easy you can't fail. It's the whole, I want to start reading. Well, I'll read, we'll read a page a night. Well, that's too easy. But it's not, is it? Because you can't even pick the book up. So read a half a page, read a damn word, I don't care, but start with something that's so easy that you can't fail, so you can anchor that habit, and then from there build upon it. Where if you start going, I'm going to do this, you see people just crash and burn.
Yeah,
I think it's too ambitious.
Yeah, I think there's a certain kind of short-term fix in making that plan of doing everything all at once. So you just think, okay, well, all of these things aren't working, especially when they see somebody, well, that person's doing all of those things, and they'll do it with New Year's resolutions. Okay, so, I want to lose 20 kilos, which isn't really a goal. That's just a kind of place number, whatever. But anyway, you want to lose. So what do I need to do? I'm going to drink all the water. I'm going to do all the exercise. I'm going to cut out all the food groups that the internet says are bad for me. I'm going to get 50,000 steps in a day. All these quite unachievable things, because I know that if I do all those things, then I will get my goal, and it's bound to work. And then it's kind of it's like being held hostage and not knowing what's going to happen, but then all of a sudden you get word that you're going to be rescued. Immediately you're less stressed,
yes.
Even though you're still a hostage, but you're going to get rescued. And it's like having the plan. Yes, I'm still in my situation, but I know that this plan will work. But they don't realise that they've got to be doing the plan, and that's the work that they're not doing. They don't need to read the whole book. They need to read a page.
Yes.
They don't need to do those things. So, it's that for that. In that sense, that's why I always pick apart people's lives and just go, well, I know that you've come to me saying, how much are your meal plans? I know that that's not going to work for you. So why don't we just replace the 2 takeaway meals a night with 1, and I'll give you a really easy recipe.
Yeah.
That's it. Why don't we just do that? We'll start with that.
10 pine chips a day, 9 pine chips a day. Well, that's
exactly.
still shit, but it's still better, and it's still closer to getting towards the goal, where I think a lot of people can't comprehend that it's okay to not do something that's the ideal, quote unquote.
I get quite a lot, being the demographic that I attract of the sort of the mums over sort of 35. I actually get quite a lot of women, mums with regular alcohol habits, especially when their children are a little bit older and their kids, don't necessarily wake up in the night or don't need them and things like that. And it will sneak in, and it's a way of them managing their stress. And some of them are, regular, everyday drinkers. And they're like, well, and they say, well, I know that's the problem, but I'm not going to give it up. I say, that's okay. I'm not asking you to give it up.
Very
Oh, really? Okay. You can just keep drinking. Why don't we just put the good things in? Then see if you start feeling better and you can manage your stress a little bit better. Then you probably might not feel like drinking as much. That 3/4 of a bottle of wine a night might turn into a half.
Yeah.
And then you might be able to manage 1 night a week without drinking at all. And then you might manage 2, and then you might wonder why you started drinking, and then you might cut it right back. And I've had that happen with quite a few clients now, and it's not because I'm definitely not qualified to be an addiction counsellor or an alcohol counsellor or anything like that. It's just all I'm doing is just fixing your nutrition first. It sorts out your stress responses, it sorts out the way you handle your emotions, your nervous system, your hormones, everything. Then you don't need that thing as much. Plus you're investing in health, which you're going to be going against your own investment by then damaging it with the alcohol that you're having. You're turning up to the gym. That that's going to sort of be lost if you drink a lot of wine that night. So it's about not taking things away from people, but just building the good things in, and you watch their behaviour change. It's good.
It is. And it's having those conversations sometimes, which it's providing a safe space. And initially, people are quite hostile, they can be quite aggressive, even though they've come to you for help. And perhaps, again, it's, okay, let's start with just some easy wins, some low-hanging fruit, and then they become more open, you build trust, you build rapport, especially if they had a bad experience. But also all of those things, like you said, change the psychology. I've often found by spending less time on nutrition initially, because I've been so focused on it, and even though I want to help people, I've broken it down, made it simpler, and just got them moving, because some people they just can't even put it together. I go, well, look, let's just get in the gym. And getting them moving and still having these conversations around nutrition, but not making it all about nutrition because there's too much pressure, they actually start to facilitate better nutrition. So, they sort of have this intertwining effect, because people start to go, well, I'm feeling better, I'm moving, but now, it makes sense to really maximize my results, and it doesn't really make sense. And, it's sort of like, hey, you've done the hard work, now do you want to follow that up and 10x your results, or increase your investment? If I said I can make this dollar equal 2 or 10, which one would you make? They might not be perfect analogies, but people get the metaphor of, yeah, you know what, I kind of doing myself a disservice now if I'm not backing it up with some sort of nutritious food which is fueling my body and nourishing it, and then again the sleep and all of that. But I do find at some point sometimes you do need to have this very real conversation where it's like, hey, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You're not going to come to me. I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to give you a magic pill like a lot of people will. At some point, you need to do this. I can give you all the resources, all the tools. We can break it down. But ultimately, you've got to face yourself in the mirror, and you're going to have to learn to cook at some point, or have some basic skills. You're going to have to learn to come to the gym. You're going to have to learn to do it without me. And you're going to have to get a certain amount of sleep. And that is just a big irony or a big wake-up call, which a lot of people do need to hear. And there's obviously a way of having those conversations. I think as you get older and with more experience, you're able to do that in a way where you can connect with people, and they're not offended, but they sort of go, and they'll look back and they go, oh, I'm really glad you were a bit, upfront with me about that. And it's like, hey, look, that was the conversation which perhaps needed to be had, which was never had. And you knew it. Because I do believe most people know what to do. They might not know the specifics of what to do, but we all know deep down what's right and what is wrong, most of us, unless it's, for the few psychopaths that are out there, there's always a rule against the law, but most of us know what's right and wrong. We know what's healthy and unhealthy on a very broad spectrum. Yes, there's a lot of misconceptions, but we've got all of the tools, we just don't know how to put them together. And that's where a good coach comes in and organizes all of that into a way, and we talk about lifestyle. I use the pillars of training, nutrition, and lifestyle, and it's like, well, that's a massive correlate to training and nutrition. So we must acknowledge it without working outside of our scopes and go, well, how can we package this in such a way the principles of training and nutrition aren't changing anytime soon, but how can we get Joe, Mary, John, Jack, whoever it is we're working with, moving towards their goals congruent to, again, their lifestyle. And that encompasses everything we talked about today.
Yep.
Right? Their cultural background, their financial welfare, their mental welfare, their experiences, all of that. And then that's how we create sustainable change. But again, that's not sexy, it can't sell it, it's not a magic pill, it sounds really hard to kind of, package up, and I think that's where people go wrong, to go, I just want the quick fix.
It's hard because, especially in our industry, there's a lot of reliance on the, the transformation photos of and I post them myself because people want to know what your results are and what you can achieve, and they see that and they think, well, okay, well, that might work for me, and it gives them a little bit of faith. But what you said about the money and investing in your health, and it doing those very, I don't like saying bad behaviours, but doing those behaviours which are not consistent with better health in a large amount, like drinking a bottle of wine when you've done a gym session that morning. I do find it's people, they attach so much sort of guilt and shame and confusion, and the physical response of hunger and all this makes the whole fitness and health and good nutrition thing complicated.
Yes.
It's how we physically feel, it's our hunger, we've got, as I said, our kids in the mix, we've got the lure of marketable foods and all these sorts of things, and there's a lot of emotional responses, but people are less, can think more black and white in terms of money. And I say to people, especially when they want fast results or whatever, how long's your mortgage? 25 years. would you expect to pay off your house in 6 months and be annoyed that you didn't and then throw it all out the window and do nothing? No, that's ridiculous. Okay, so if you're 20 kilos overweight, let's do the sums, and we can use a bit of a formula and have a bit of an estimate of how long that will take. I did one for a client the other day, said you're looking at about 66 weeks. And she went, oh, I was hoping 6 months. I said, 6 months is physically impossible, unless you drop all of your muscle mass and you don't eat anything in that time, and it's just going to be very unhealthy, and it's not what I do. But every week that you get, you will be further along than you were the week before. And like saving money, you're not going to just like save and save and save and save and save, and then in 6 months' time go, well, I'm not where I want to be, I'm just going to go and spend it all on something stupid and stop doing it. You don't. You keep saving and you stay in it long enough until you're in that spot. So people can think, when you sort of explain it like that, like, oh, okay, they get that idea of actually investing in health. It's a term that we use a lot, but you actually are investing in health. Every little thing that you do builds you up and makes you stronger. And your family's health and all these skills that we use and everything, it's part of the whole thing. And there isn't anything more important. Phone calls, social media time is not more important. Laminated brows are not more important. The most important thing, and you think about the biggest things that have an effect on our physical state are the air we breathe, the food and drink that we consume, and what we put on our skin. So, there's obviously a lot of places in the body that you can absorb poisons. I used to, a long time ago, be a gardener, so I did a whole course on
the plot thickens.
Yeah, a whole course.
You've done a few things, haven't you?
I've done a few things. I'm old though, so
Just a number.
So I used to be a gardener, and we did a whole course on chemical exposure, safe handling of pesticides and herbicides and things like that. So the forehead, the hands, the soles of your feet, and funnily enough, the testicles are the most absorbent points for poison, apart from ingesting it. So you think about, not that that's really relevant as much to fitness and health, but
no, but it does.
The liquid we drink, the food that we eat, and
the
the air that we breathe are the most important things. And COVID's a perfect example of how all of a sudden everyone's paranoid about the air that they're breathing, because it's everywhere. It's in the air. Like all of a sudden now we're actually paying attention to the air that we're breathing. But you tell people to get outside and go for a walk in the fresh air when they've been stuck inside for 3 days in the air conditioning or playing video games, and it's like, what do you mean? It's like, fresh air, sunshine is super important. You've got to get outside and go for a walk.
Humans,
it's we're meant to breathe fresh air. Like, we need oxygen exchange. It's just part of what makes us run properly. So if the next biggest thing that we has an effect on our physical body by consumption is food and drink, why are we throwing alcohol down our throats in high degrees that Australians do? I don't mind the occasional drink, but and the food, this is absorbing right directly into our bodies from the inside of our bodies. Why are we putting awful stuff in there? Of course there's the occasional thing and the treat and the whatever, and there is a balance, but
it's not about
not to the degree that it is these days. And that's, I think, just the biggest challenge that families face, and the convenience and all those sorts of things. So
there's no balance and moderation. But it's a great concept that you use there, and a great few concepts is what you said, even with relating to money and things like that, and using calories. And again, it's about using metaphors and examples for people to draw on, and something will hit and go, oh yeah, I know what you mean. That is part of the fun and the art of coaching, is the communication of knowledge, so people can understand and implement it in a way that's achievable for them. But yeah, that's a very simple and a very raw. I've often thought of that myself, or when I'm explaining it, I'm like, look, don't you think like everything you do is external? You're putting something inside your body. Like, do you not, wouldn't it make sense that, okay, the weights are external, but there's something happening internally, but it's an external force that's creating that, but you're putting something inside your body, you're ingesting it. Doesn't that make sense by the sense of logic that it would have a bigger effect? I guess, yeah. So sometimes it's just about thinking through these things as well.
Yeah.
Where people can go, actually, yeah, that does actually ring home, and okay, so maybe I need to. Or in instances where we go through this crisis and all of a sudden it makes sense again, well, it's like, well, actually, it's just doing the basics. And that kind of brings us back to that concept of, I think we've lost touch with that, and oftentimes it's not what we're doing, it's what we're not doing, or vice versa. where it's like, man, life is really simple. Once again, humans have complicated everything. Relationships, a game of football, cooking in the kitchen, there's a restaurant behind us. You know, all of these things, it's like, man, you know what? The basics, once again, are the best, but we're always trying to overcomplicate it, or we're in this constant world where we're overstimulated by media that we've lost our way. It's like, drink your 3 liters of water every day. Go out and do a walk. Have an interaction with someone, have some physical touch, do some physical training, read something, play an instrument, get creative. It's like all these little things, and I get it, and I can hear people probably saying now, yeah, but that's easier said than done. Yeah, it is. It is easier said than done. That's why people like us exist. But if we actually went back and got to those basics and simplified it, life, ironically, would be so much simpler and would be so much happier and healthier. So really, what we need to do is go back and do the basics and then rebuild again. Or sometimes we get so caught up, we need to just pull back, zoom out for a little bit and go, what is actually important and how can I reprioritize those basics? Because again, we've just got over time so caught up in whether it's keeping up with the Joneses or focusing on things which are really, if we sat down and think about it and took a breath, unimportant. Because how many people would go for a walk without the device? How many people would sit down, like say right now, if we turned all this off and just sat here and not even had a conversation and just thought and just let the thoughts come in? Even in the toilet, people don't do that anymore because they've got their phones or something. So it is ironic to me, and it's always fascinating to me how it's the basics and the simple things that we have to come full circle. Like it's almost a bit of an enigma or equilibrium in some way where we've just lost touch with, like, we've come so far as a human race and we've created so many great things, but we almost need to kind of go back to some things to come back forward, which is an interesting concept. But anyway, I was going to talk about finance, but we're coming to time, and I think that because I know you've helped me with that and you have some great knowledge to share, perhaps we do that on a different episode, which would be cool, because I like what you spoke about and what we spoke about today. But before we close out, as ever, I want to get through some rapid fire questions, a bit more lighthearted in nature. And then end on something which is, you know, quite sentimental to the podcast. It's a question I always ask everyone. So one of the first things I would ask you is, and I did want to ask you this anyway, if you could go back and speak to your younger self and you only had, you know, a minute, what would be the main concepts or, you know, words that you'd want yourself to hear, even if you were back there, like what you would actually articulate and take on? So say, for example, early teens versus maybe even early 20s, what's something that you'd go back and say, hey, look, here's something that if you get this bang on now, you're going to be in a better position?
That's an easy one. I would easily say, hands down, nobody cares about what you're doing because they're all focusing on themselves. All young people, especially teenagers, become so self-conscious, so worried about putting themselves out there in the world because what will people think, what will people do? Gym training, they don't want to get on the main floor because what if they don't know how to use a piece of equipment and then they look like a goose or whatever. Nobody cares what you're doing because they're too busy caring about themselves. And if I'd known that and believed that when I was young, I would be a lot further ahead in life than I am now. But even, you know, putting myself out there with my business and all the publicity that we do and those sorts of things, I've only been able to do that, wouldn't have been able to do that 10 years ago because I still felt that, oh, what if I look like this? Or what if, you know, people who are self-conscious on videos or using photos of themselves, or what if I'm not good enough? And everybody thinks that you're awesome, most people that meet you. And if they don't, they choose to not know you. So you can pretty much rest assured that most of the people that are in your circle think that you're awesome. So, you know, you don't really need to worry too much what those people think. And, you know, I always say to my kids, like, if somebody is thinking a mean thought about you, like, you know, oh, she looks stupid in those clothes or whatever, they're so mean that why would you want to know them? So it doesn't matter what they think because you will never know them because they're just mean people. Let them go and be mean somewhere else. And they're going to be thinking about that with everybody else. The other thing that I would say, which is kind of related to that, is don't judge anybody for anything ever because that's when you start judging yourself. So if you start looking at somebody going, oh, you know, she looks a bit, you know, I say this to my clients, like, why do you think that people will think that you look silly being overweight in the gym? Do you look at somebody else who is overweight in the gym and think they are silly? And they, oh, well, you know, sometimes I think, well, I'm not that bad. Okay, you've just judged that person. So you're thinking that other people are judging you. If you don't judge anyone, you forget that people judge people. and it doesn't even occur to you that somebody might be judging you. So even if you catch yourself having a judgy thought, pull yourself up on it and ask yourself why. You know, what do you get out of having that thought? Is it really nice? You know, what could be going on with that person that they could have so many other things in their life that they've got 10 toddlers at home and they're a single mum and that's why they've got like spew down their t-shirt walking at the lake because it's the only chance they get to exercise. Oh my God, they're out exercising, good on them. Like, turn it around and have a good thought, because then you will start believing that other people are having those thoughts about you, and it creates happiness. You just feel happy. So turn any judgy thoughts that you have around, and don't ever think that what somebody thinks of you matters, because it just absolutely doesn't at all.
A great point, and one that we should all understand. Where attention goes, energy flows.
Absolutely.
And it clears up a lot of mental real estate for more important things, right?
Yep.
It's what you focus on that comes to fruition. Second one is, if you could choose a superpower, what would it be and why? And any superpower, I think you are semi-prepared for this
I've
one.
thought a lot about this one because I have listened to a lot of your podcasts, and there's a few, but I'm going to have to pick one, and I would have to say to be a shapeshifter.
Oh, I like it.
To anything, like inanimate objects or anything. Like, you know, Terminator 2 with
right.
the bad Terminator, how he can like turn into metal and other people also.
Yes.
You could do anything. Anything.
Yeah. So for you, it's not to necessarily shift in space and time to a different place. It's to
No.
be able to shapeshift into like an object or a person or a
Like
thing.
right now, like
Could become a table. And
turn
just listen in on
into a table and be a fly on the wall.
Yeah,
Like you could sneak into things, you could imitate people, like
I like it. I don't think
the capacity for crime is huge, but also the capacity for fun is just limitless.
You
with
could also
that.
solve
So
crime though, couldn't you?
You could.
So I'm just going to sit here as the pen.
Yep.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And I don't think I've had that one yet. So
Yeah,
that's,
definitely be a
that's good one.
shapeshifter.
That is
Yeah.
a good one. This one will be something close to your heart because you're passionate about food, and I'm interested to know. I think I've inadvertently asked you this in conversations, maybe when we were with Josie, when we had the Trainer HQ and the U event, possibly. But I'll package it like this: if you had one last meal, to not to be pessimistic, or what would be your favourite meal, and in combination. So, for example, you can have entree, main, dessert, even a drink with it. What is your go-to? The one thing you can't say no to, or the foods that you're like, absolutely, that is my favourite combination of food. What would it be?
I would have to say anything Italian.
Oh, yes.
And I've never been to Italy, and it's just something that I want to go there and like stay for like at least 6 months and live somewhere.
It's amazing.
I've heard the Amalfi Coast is incredible, and to just go and eat like just any kind of abundance in Italian seafood in that location would be incredible. So, and then the desserts and everything too, like just anything. Like I love the flavors.
It's the quality
it's a thing.
of it.
Yeah,
It's the composition, and it's the environment, the flavors, the smells.
Yeah, it's the everything.
It's the collective experience.
Yeah.
Go through the Cinque Terre, phenomenal. Of the Amalfi Coast, and you're just the food, the people, the vibes, the drink, the pastries. It's yes, can confirm on another level. That's for sure.
That's a bucket list for me. Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
And my final, or the main question, because I do have another little adjunct to this question, which I'll ask at the end, but the final one is, which I ask all my guests, is if you can, and you'll know what this is if you listen to my podcast, is identifying a fear. So what that fear is, if you're still going through it, what it was, if you've overcome it, something that's reminiscent, and something that had a great takeaway or a learning from that fear, or the fear you're still working through. What would that fear be or have been? And how did you overcome it, and what did you learn from it?
It's kind of still a work in progress, though I'm a lot more aware of it now than I ever was. But the fear of not being good enough. I am not a tall person. I sit around about 160 centimetres. And from a very young age, I was always the smallest. So I was always the little one, the cute one. It was almost like, she's too cute and little to matter. She doesn't really matter. Like, we'll listen to everyone else. And I sort of had this kind of need to be bigger and more to try and sort of match the people that were my peers. And even years later, when I was learning dance at one point, I was terrible at it. But my instructor said to me, You're doing, your movements are too big, like you're too, you're standing out because you're doing too much.
Yes.
And I said, well, isn't that the point? Like, shouldn't everybody be doing like the maximum? Like, no, there's a, an energy and a flow. And I'm like, okay, well, She said, it's okay. She said, I understand because I'm small as well. She said, little people try harder. And so
we want to be seen.
I have always had that, fear of not being good enough, but on a sort of more emotional source of that is because my parents divorced when I was young. I was about 10, and my father sort of like left and didn't have very much contact with us after that. He married somebody else and changed his name to a hyphenated name. My mother married somebody else because she grew up in the sort of, the 50s, 60s, you have to have a husband, so she was just like terrified of being a single mum. So she married very quickly and changed her name. And all of a sudden, it was only me and my sister that had the same surname. I didn't have the same surname as either of my parents, and I felt like I didn't belong. And so I just sort of felt very much like it was kind of at that sort of age 11, 12, and it kind of really hit me as a teenager, that all that sort of like, am I good enough? I'm, never going to be this or that or whatever, I'm not wanted and all those kinds of things. So my compensation for that was always overdoing things to try and be good enough so that I would finally be accepted. And so that carried, I didn't understand that for like many, many years. So that's carried kind of all the way through. And now it's obviously serving me very well because I kind of do things, to a high degree, and it's allowed me to, launch a business, which is going well, and doing those sorts of things. So it's not a bad thing. And being small now, I realise is not a bad thing either. Even though I used to have a kid in kindergarten that used to wrap me up in a blanket and put me in a pram and carry me around like I was her doll. And my mum actually had to go down to the school and tell her to stop treating me like her live doll because I was too small. So, so the fear of being small. But fear of not being good enough. And most of it's gone now because I sort of feel, especially since becoming a mum, you realise that you are good enough. But it's something that I think it plagues a lot of women especially. Men tend to be more like, of course I'm good enough. Why aren't I good enough? Even if they're not, technically.
Yes.
They have more of an overinflated opinion of themselves, which I think is just a male trait. But women tend to be more like, even though they're doing all the work and earning lots of money and all the housework and raising the kids and have studied to a high degree, and they're still not quite good enough, So I think it's a little bit of a female thing as well. So, But mostly over that one.
For sure. No, it's good. I think that's probably something that a lot of people at this point with the audience that we have can connect with, because I always talk about how that is actually always the answer. I don't know if you know that or not, but listening to the podcast, but unanimously, I think I've only had one or two answers which have been different, which is like public speaking, but it actually all stems back. It's almost, at this point, I'm realizing it's a trick question because everyone I seem to gravitate to...
It comes back to that.
Well, but everyone I also get on the podcast seems to we have the same ethos as we are somewhat passionate about something, and most of us are creative and we want something a little bit better than the average. So we all share this whole, I need to be better, or it needs to be better, or we've come from a place of feeling inferior. That's why we've overcompensated, but then hopefully we've made those, changes and evolutions, or we've resolved those issues. I don't know, I can connect with that being a smaller human as well, to a place where it served us positively now, and we've got it under control in a balanced way and address that. So, I appreciate you sharing. And the adjunct to that is if you could offer anyone listening just one small thing that they could do every day to improve their life, whether it was going for a walk or drinking a glass of water, what would be the one thing that you just offer every single person listening to do, which would have a positive impact on their life?
I'd say throw out the complicated plans, and, as we've talked about all the way through, just focus on the basics. So drink enough water, eat vegetables most of the time, most meals, eat enough protein, go for a walk every day. If you did those 4 things, especially if you're in a position now where your weight is an issue or your health is an issue, you did those 4 things for a year, your life next year, at this point next year, will be dramatically different. Just every single day, you've got to do those 4 things. And it's not hard. It's not hard to walk every day. It's not hard to drink water every day. You have to. Don't go a day without eating vegetables. It's just, they're everywhere. I've heard about countries overseas where, you can go into a town or there's not a shop that has any fresh vegetables at all, which I can't imagine. Like Australia, we really are very lucky to have everything everywhere. Eat your vegetables and get some good lean protein. That's it.
Great advice. Simple and effective. And where can people find you if they want to learn more, or perhaps they want to reach out, especially some of the demographic of which you speak to? Where are the best places?
Easiest place is my website, thedietcoach.com.au. There's links there to my Instagram and Facebook. You can join my Facebook community. Everyone's welcome to do that, and that's got daily tips and posts about my kind of philosophies. And my Instagram, which is at thedietcoach.com.au, is the full handle, and that is pretty much puts up a philosophy of what I do, my style basically. If you follow that, you'll get a good idea of my style, and you can message me through any of those things.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thank you for your time, Amber. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And we're almost low power, but we're not. It's still running. It's rolling. Well, it was low power mode, but we're good. Guys, I'll put all those links in the description as always, so you can follow along, and make sure you do check out and reach out to Amber. And of course, you already know, if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you. We're over the 1,000 subscriber mark now. We're getting there. We're reaching more people. Same with the podcast. So if you enjoyed it, share it around, leave a rating and a review. New alert, you can actually do it now on Spotify. So if you go to Spotify, because most people listen on Spotify, it's the new medium, it's the way of the world. If you've left one on Apple, great, but literally super easy. You don't even have to write anything, you just rate it with the star review. So if you like this podcast, head over there, give it a rating. It really does help, especially if it's safe to do so. You're not driving in the car. It's a small thing. We've talked about it today. Do what's right, not what's easy. And I really appreciate that. And of course, we're going to be back for a massive 2022 with lots of amazing guests like Amber, lots of insightful conversations to once again help all of you in the realms of everything training, nutrition, and lifestyle. So until the next episode, as always, guys, stay fearless. So you can just do something.
I'll do a flex.
Yeah, ready?
I got something to flex. Sort of, not really.
For those of you who are confused, frustrated, and sick and tired of not seeing the results that you want or deserve, make sure that you click the Apply for Coaching button in the description below and line up a completely free consultation with myself, where we can discover if it's a good fit as client and coach, and take your health and physique to the next level once and for all.